Okay, hey everybody. So this is going to be the fifth and final part of our Fusion 360 V8 engine tutorial. At this point, you should have all these parts completed on the left here. So all these parts, connecting rod, the cap, crankshaft, engine block, and the piston head. And the last tutorial, we finished up that engine block. And today we're going to be putting all these pieces together into an engine assembly, like you see over here. And once we put them all together, they will actually be jointed in a way that they move just like a V8 engine. Pretty cool, huh? So without further ado, let's get right into it. The first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to open up our engine block file. This is where we're going to be creating our assembly. Double click that and open it up. Now, first thing we're going to want to do in our engine block file is actually turn our engine body into a component. How we're going to do that is we're going to find our bodies folder in the feature tree, hit the drop down, right click the body, which is linked with this engine right here, and we're going to choose create component from bodies. We hit that, you see a new component pops up. So a component is symbolized by a cube, and then these bodies, which you saw before, it was symbolized by a cylinder, right? So now this engine is a component. You can double click that to change the name, and we're just going to call this engine block. Oops, engine block. Okay, so the first step is done. Now, another thing we want to do is we want to make sure that this engine isn't moving around while all the other parts inside are moving around, right? Because right now, if we take it, we can drag it all around however much we want, which isn't good, because if the engine can move and all these other parts can move, it's just going to create a mess. So we're going to want to right-click engine block. At the top, we're going to choose ground. Now you see a little pin appear next to our engine block component icon. That just means it's grounded, and if we try to drag it around, you will find that you cannot drag it around anymore, which is exactly what we want. Okay, so once we have our engine block as a component, now we're going to start inserting our other components into this assembly. And you can see that up here, this icon turned into 3 blocks, which is the icon for an assembly, right? Once again, bodies are a cylinder, components are a block, and these 3 blocks is an assembly. So we're going to insert our crankshaft by right-clicking it and choosing Insert into Current Design. And boom, there we go. Our crankshaft is in the design as a component, which is what we want. And the reason why we want this as a component is the new feature we're learning today called joint only works between 2 components. So we want to make sure everything in here is a component. Now you see there's an option to move the crankshaft around. We're not going to have to use that because our joint feature will actually help us move it to the proper position and establish motion between the crankshaft and the engine block. So joint is really, really useful. So now that we have our crankshaft in here, one thing we'll notice is that it has this little link, right? Now what does this link mean? This chain link just means that this is linked to another part in the project, which is crankshaft. So say we go open crankshaft and we make a small edit. Like say we make this handle a little bit longer, right? So if we go sketch, create a circle here, and we extrude this maybe another 10 millimeters. See that the handle is a little bit longer. If we save that, Control S, we'll see that when we come back to our assembly, there's a warning sign next to that link symbol on our crankshaft. Now this just means that our crankshaft is now out of date because we edited it in the original file. If we right-click this, we'll see there is a Get Latest option over here. So when we hit Get Latest, see that this handle got extended out a little bit, right? So if I undo what I just did, you'll see that there's the shorter, older version with the error. If I redo it, It is the updated, longer version. Okay? So that's what this link means. It just means that any edits you make in the original file will update in the assembly. Okay, so now that we have that taken care of, we're going to go ahead and start using our joints. So you'll find the joint feature up in the top over here in your Assemble tab. And once you click joint, what you're going to do, you're going to first click this face over here to the back of your crankshaft. And then we're going to click the very back of our engine block. When we hit that, we can see that our crankshaft got moved to the exact position that we wanted it, except it's kind of doing a weird motion sliding in and out, which is not exactly what we want. So then we're going to go to our motion tab next to position, and we can see right now it's a slider. That's why the crankshaft was sliding in and out. We want that to be revolute, which means that the crankshaft is just rotating. Now you can see it does a little demo of the motion, and that's exactly what we want. So we're going to hit OK. Now, once we have revolute established, we can actually grab the crankshaft handle. And when we spin our mouse, we can see that the crankshaft spins as well. And there we go. Our first joint is completed. Now, another way you can go about spinning this is just clicking this blue flag in the back. Right? And when you double click it, a little spinner will pop up, and you can hold this and rotate that way as well. Either way works. Okay? So now that we have our crankshaft in, it is time to add our pistons. So how we're going to do this is first, we're going to have to put our piston together. So we're going to have to insert the different components. So connecting rod first, once again, right click, insert into current design, and then connecting rod cap. Okay, that connecting rod cap, right click, insert into current design. And we're just going to drag that out so that it's a little bit in front of our connecting rod, and then hit OK. Now what we're going to do with this is we're going to put another joint between the cap and the rod. Okay, we're going to hit joint, make sure we capture the position. So we're going to click this hole on the connecting rod, and then the corresponding hole right here of the connecting rod cap. You can see that joins them together. Right now it does a little preview of the connecting rod and connecting rod cap rotating, and that's because we have revolute selected. But we don't want them to rotate. We want this to stay rigid in the same place. So we're actually going to click rigid for our motion type. Kind of gives it a little shake. That just kind of shows that this isn't going anywhere. This is stuck together now with this joint. As I can demonstrate when I click OK. If I take it and drag it around, you can see nothing I do will take these two apart. So these two pieces are permanently put together, which is what we want. Next, we're going to insert our piston head. So once again, right click, insert into current design. And we're just going to leave it right there because the piston head is actually going to connect to this side of our connecting rod right here. So all you have to do is put it somewhere near, right, where you want to connect it. It doesn't have to be perfect because as you saw with our other joints, it moves it to the correct position automatically. So once again, we're going to hit joint, capture position. We're going to choose this hole on our connecting rod, and then we're going to choose that corresponding hole on our piston head. So right in here. You can see once we click that, right now we had our rigid motion selected. But we actually want this piston to be able to rotate. So we're going to go into our motion and select revolute. Once we select that, it gives us a little preview that the piston head and the connecting rod now rotate with each other. And then we're just going to hit OK. Going back to our home view, you can see all these pieces are connected together now as a piston. But if you remember from our engine assembly, we're going to need 8 of these, right? It's going to be a lot of copying and pasting, and a lot of work. Oops, sorry. A lot of work if we have to do this 8 more times. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to save all 3 of these and their joints into one new component called piston. How we do that is we're going to go next to our joint and select new component. And make sure activate is unchecked. I believe it's checked by default. And we're just going to name this component piston and hit OK. Now you can see piston got created in our feature tree over here. And all we're going to do is we're going to drag each part, capture position, drag each part of our piston into our piston assembly, right? And you can see it's an assembly by those 3 blocks there. And once we select our piston assembly, you can see that it highlights every single part on there, which is exactly what we want. Okay, so now that we have our piston assembly taken care of, we can start putting these pistons onto our engine. And as you may have guessed, this is going to be using a bunch of other joints. The first joint we're going to use, click joint, and we're going to click either side, either semicircle on the crankshaft or the crankshaft cap, or sorry, the connecting rod or the connecting rod cap. I'm just going to click that semicircle, and then we're going to hit a corresponding piece on our crankshaft. It'll be this right here. Okay, and once that snaps there, we want to make sure our motion type is not revolute anymore, but we want it to be cylindrical. Okay, the only difference is that cylindrical can move same as revolute, but also, as you saw there in the preview, it can have translational motion along that axis or rod. Then we're going to hit OK. And at first you'll see that only half of our piston went, but after you click OK, then all the rest of the piston comes with it. Okay, that is the first one of our constraints right there. Next, what we're going to want to do, another joint, we're going to select the top of our piston head, and then we're going to select this first hole right here. And the type of motion we want, right now it's cylindrical selected, but we don't want it to be spinning around, right? We just want it to be sliding up and down. So the type of motion we're going to choose is slider. You can see the preview, piston is just sliding up and down, which is what we want. We're going to hit OK. So once we have those 2 joints set, we can test a little preview of this. So as we turn the crankshaft, you can see, or if I can get this right, as we turn the crankshaft, you can see this working well. So the connecting rod has a cylindrical joint to the crankshaft, and the piston is sliding in and out of that hole. There we go, 1 out of 8 done. So for the next 7 joints, it's just going to be the exact same procedure. We're going to be copying and pasting 7 more pistons, and then we're going to attach them in the exact same way. So we're going to right-click our piston, hit copy, and then we're going to right-click anywhere and hit paste. And make sure you hit continue instead of capture position. And then we'll just drag this piston out, and we can see we have an exact copy of that piston. We're going to hit OK. Next, we're going to choose joint. And this time I'll choose the upper semicircle, just to show that both can work. We're going to go down here and click our crankshaft. And let's make sure that motion was cylindrical. Hit OK. Next, we're going to select the face and this hole. And there we go. We have it in the hole, and make sure that is a sliding motion. Now sometimes Fusion 360 might insert the piston head upside down, and all you have to do in that case is use the flip option down here, and you can flip it back to the correct position. Once we have that done, we're going to hit OK. And now, voila, we have 2 pistons in our V8 engine. There we go. So just going to do that 6 more times. And after you have that done, you should have a completed V8 engine. Okay, so I hope you were able to finish all 8 pistons onto your crankshaft, jointing them together. And when you're done, it should look a little something like this. When you rotate the crankshaft handle, all 8 pistons chugging along, just like fully functioning V8 engine. Some pretty cool stuff there. So at this point in time, you are completely finished CADing and jointing together this V8 engine assembly. Congratulations. We can go ahead and hit Control S to save. You'll see it should pop up on the left side here for you with all the rest of your parts. So once again, at this point in time, you're completely finished with CADing it, but going forward, you can do some experimenting with the different tools we've learned throughout this course. So one thing you can do is go to Modify and Appearance, or just the keyboard shortcut A. You can change the material of your engine. You can see if you want it to be a bit more metallic or realistic, you can drag metal onto here. All right. I personally prefer polycarbonate because you can see everything going on inside. And there's many, many materials you can search up in Fusion 360's library. That's one thing you can do there. Another thing we've learned is the fillet. So we can fillet out the corners. If you think this engine block doesn't look good enough to your standards, you can go fill it around, kind of refine the edges. So at this point, all you're going to do is just look through the toolbar, experiment with features, and after all, that's really how you learn a lot of things in CAD, just playing around with them. So just as a quick recap, in this lesson, we mainly focused on joints and components. Right? So we turned our bodies into components so that we could use joints on them. And the joints types we learned were revolute, which is what we used on the crankshaft to make it spin, cylindrical, which is what we used on our connecting rods to make it slide and spin, and finally slider, which let our piston head slide in and out of these V8 engine holes. So I hope you enjoyed working with that V8 engine assembly. It's definitely a really fun assembly to play around with. But yeah, using these skills you learned in this course, I hope you're able to do great things in Fusion 360 in the future. And I will see you in our final lesson. Thanks for watching.